So I made a couple of videos about this, raising awareness that the EU is planning to vote on legislation that's going to update copyright laws within the EU. And the legislation is absolutely terrible. Every expert that has looked at it is saying that it's bad. The journalists are saying that it's bad. But it seems that the German MPs, they're using intimidation tactics and they're trying to force other people to vote the right way. You should watch my previous video for more details. I covered all of that. And this is from another EU MP that's basically testifying the way that there are major pressures within the EU Parliament right now. So basically someone looked it up and I think it legally checks out. Yeah, like according to this new legislation, memes are going to be banned from the internet, because if you're going to meme something, you're going to basically break copyright laws. You have to understand, this new legislation gives an inalienable right to the press, so that everything they do is now an intellectual property and is under copyright law. So if a journalist from, let's say, The Guardian, posts a meme in his article, that meme will be considered his intellectual property. And it's very interesting that this is an inalienable right. Like, the journalist from The Guardian can't say, no, I want people to be able to use my article. I want them to be able to share it on the internet. He can't do that, right? So every time someone that's not a journalist is going to use something that a journalist has published, he is going to break copyright and he has to pay a tax, a link tax, which the journalist can't waiver. It's just the most bizarre, mind-boggling legislation that they could come up with. So according to Sky News, they're pointing out that digital rights campaigners are warning that the new law could lead to the destruction of the internet as we know it. A new copyright law from the EU would lead to the banning of memes on the internet. The EU Copyright Directive intends to protect the intellectual property rights of people who upload their material on the internet. So this is what they're going with. This is what they would want the legislation to do. However, the legislation goes way beyond that. And they're pointing out that all content uploaded to the internet is going to have to be monitored and potentially deleted if a likeness to existing copyright is protected. So in other words, imagine this, right? It's going to be an algorithm. You can't have people doing this because it's too much work. So imagine if The Guardian uses, let's say, this meme, right? And they take it from the public space. It's not theirs. They didn't create it. But they use this meme in order to put it in one of their articles. Well, now it becomes their IP. So if I want to use it in my video, my video will first have to be uploaded into the database to be checked and see if I link to anything that's considered intellectual property. And the algorithm will find out that, hold on, I used this picture that has also been used by a journalist, and therefore, right? Like it's just, oh my God, I can't believe how stupid this is. Everyone is saying it's stupid, not me, the experts, right? Just check my previous video again, and you will see just how the experts think about this brilliant piece of legislation. So this is from the Article 13, and online platforms would be economically damaged if they were forced to comply with its expensive obligations. The law would destroy the internet as we know it, are the campaigners warning, and allow big companies to control what we see and do online. Essentially, the campaigners are arguing the stringent copyright protections of Article 13 would damage the sharing of parody content and memes, which, while themselves being original and creative works, are often developed from other people's original content. Now, this goes way beyond what intellectual property was initially meant to do, right? Because why do we have intellectual property? Where when you have a physical product, let's say you have a car, right? We don't have the technology to somehow copy someone's car and now have like two versions of that car, right? No, you don't have that. Like you buy a car and it's a physical thing, right? If someone takes it away, you lose it. But when it comes for intellectual property, let's say you write a book, Someone can copy your book word for word. And now that person, even though he hasn't stolen your book, you still own it, that person now has another version of your book. So you as an author are going to have to find the problem monetizing your work if people can just copy it, right? So therefore, we now have an intellectual property law which makes absolutely sure that authors are protected and they can still monetize their intellectual value. But of course, this doesn't mean that someone can't criticize an author's book. And in order to criticize it, you know, to help the consumer know which books they can buy and which books they can't, you need to have a loophole. You need a special place for the people who are criticizing the author's work to be able to do so by quoting paragraphs and by quoting pieces of that particular book. And this is called fair use, right? So we have this idea of fair use so people can review someone else's work. People can make parody of someone else's work because parody is another intellectual property. And all of this right now exists. But with this Article 13 bullshit, with this new legislation from the EU, you will not be able to do this anymore. You will not be able to criticize a journalist for the article he writes. You will not be able to review a movie if you're going to show clips or trailer from that movie. You're pretty much not going to be able to do anything that right now falls under fair use. Fair use is going to be dead unless you pay a tax. And a lot of people aren't comfortable with the idea of paying a tax. And it's not the act of paying it itself. It's also the fact that you're going to have to upload everything that you do on the internet through a database. And that database is just basically going to give you the okay or not. It's almost like in the military, you know, during World War II, if you wanted to write a letter home, it would have to go through a censor, and the censor would look at it, and they would decide, yeah, okay, this passes or this doesn't. Of course, all of this is going to be done by AIs, by software, and we know how accurate software is. You know, every single month YouTube is like, oh, oops, well, the algorithm is still learning. I'm sorry we fucked up and deleted thousands of right-wing channels. You know, like this shit. And not only that, you know, if you're in America and you're going to say, oh, these Europeans, you know, they're silly. This isn't going to affect me. Well, all of these programs, all of these AIs that are going to be meant for censorship are going to be shipped in your country eventually, you know? And it's not only that. If you create something, like let's say you're a YouTube creator, or you wanna write a newspaper, you wanna write something, right, on the internet, people from EU are not going to be able to view that. Like, you're going to lose the entire EU market because they're going to be behind the firewall. They're not going to have access to that shit because it's breaking copyright laws over here. So apparently memes, including image macros, such as the stock photograph of a distracted boyfriend. I love how they describe memes. Jesus the Christ, normies. The campaign follows an open letter sent by academics from intellectual property research centers in Europe regarding the copyright directive. The allegations have been robustly rejected by the EU Commission. Again, to remind people, the EU Commission is not elected. Okay, no one can decide from the public who gets to sit on the European Commission. They don't respond to anyone. They're an unelected body, which is why the EU is not democratic. So in 2016, the European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker said that he wanted journalists, publishers, and authors to be paid fairly for their work. It doesn't matter what he said. This is not what the law is doing. Okay? The law is not protecting journalists, publishers, and authors. It goes way beyond what it should actually do. The copyright protections would apply to that work, whether it is made in studios or living rooms, whether it is disseminated offline or online, whether it is published via a copying machine or commercially hyperlinked on the web. So you can't even put a link to another website because you need to pay a tax. In response to the campaign, a European Commission spokesperson told Sky News, the idea behind our copyright proposals is that people should be able to make a living from their creative ideas. The proposal to modernize EU copyright provisions will not harm freedom of expression on the internet. This is what he is saying, but it's not true. It actually does. It totally does. They take into account the technological development that have already been introduced by some of the major players which will help in two ways. Firstly, they help to inform authors when their work are used online and to prevent that these works are used by major online platforms without the author's consent. Again, the law doesn't do this. As I read through it, apparently the journalist can't say, yeah, I want my work to be used with my consent. No, he can't give consent. Secondly, such technological developments help to ensure the author's fair remuneration for their work. Again, economists are coming up, watch my previous videos, they're saying that this law has been done in Spain, and instead of noticing an increase economically, journalists notice a major decrease because people wouldn't link to their work and people wouldn't look at it. So instead of paying the tax, people just refuse to link to their work, and thus they notice a decrease in the traffic. And Google just shut down Google News in Spain. I don't know if it's back up. I don't know if they decided to rework, but big corporations just said, you know what, we're just not going to do business. We're not going to pay. If you don't want us, we're not going to do business. And then, you know, the public is going to wonder, where did Google News go? If I was Google, I don't know if Google wants this law to pass or not. I think they don't, because they're going to have to pay the link tax. They should just protest as well. They should shut down Google, the entire Google, for like 2 days in the European Union, and just give an explanation why they did it. I don't think this is financially profitable for Google either. And anyone thinking, oh, you can still use a proxy, you know, you can still use a VPN. Not if they're forcing the ISPs to block it. So they will manage to find ways so that you can't use VPNs. Let me know what you think. Horrible legislation, absolutely atrocious. We're going to see what's going to happen. I think next month is the vote. Next month. Only 1 month advice for people. Like you only have 1 month to react to it. I think this was intentional. So yeah, looking forward to reading from you guys in the comment section.